Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It is the top of the hour, so we can go ahead and get started now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Today, our topic of conversation is resource planning, prioritizing your people, and some best practices and how and tips to make resource planning less of a burden and more of a successful endeavor for your organization. Looks like we do still have some people joining, so they might miss the extra fun of our logistics part of things, but we will run through some housekeeping items before we start today. Michael, can you just advance the slide one? There we go, perfect. We are targeting a 1-hour event in total, leaving a full 15 minutes of that for question and answer period. All lines are on mute, so if you are violently disagreeing with anything we're saying, it's just like sports on TV. We can't hear you. But that said, we do want to hear what you have to say, so go ahead and enter those into the Q&A box as they come up, and we'll try to address them. Some of the things get answered as we go along, but if they don't, feel free to send them on over our way, and we'll try to address everything we can. We will be returning the favor as well, just so you can keep a heads up. We have some polling questions lined up for you today, so go ahead and keep a lookout for when we're asking you questions, and we can go ahead and make sure we get the right information as we're presenting the topics, kind of dynamic a little bit as what people are feeling in their organizations today. We are recording the event, and yes, you will get the recording and slides after we're finished, so don't worry about that. They'll be in your inbox within a day. Yes, go ahead to the next one. My name is Lindsay Marymont. I'm here on the marketing team at Keyed In. I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Ketchmere. Michael is the head of solutions and enablement here at Keyed In. He has a wealth of knowledge in the industry. He comes recently from some other project management solutions and has a lot of experience in the field. So we're really lucky to have Michael here today. He joins us from Oregon, so hopefully any of the background noise you do hear is probably storms happening in the background, but hopefully you're staying dry in this weather.
Absolutely.
All right, and for the agenda today, we do have a couple of items we plan to cover. First of all is a background and kind of a resource planning overview, and then we'll go ahead and talk about some best practices for resource planning. These are best practices aimed at everybody, so everybody can use them. You don't need fancy tools or software in order to instill some of these things. And then we'll move into tips and tricks that utilize PPM or RPM solutions, so that if you do have some solutions, there's some more actionable items you can take. We have a little bit on the future of innovation, where some of this is headed, and some of the things we think you can do moving forward with your resource planning. And then, of course, we'll have a summary and a wrap-up heading into the Q&A portion of today's event. So a nice presentation plan for you guys, really excited. And with that, I will hand it over to Michael.
Thanks, Lindsay. Appreciate the warm introduction. So to set the stage for today's presentation, I'd like to start by posing the following question. Does any of this sound familiar? According to Gartner, most organizations tend to overestimate their resource capacity. The result is overcommitment of resources to both pending projects and programs, and that leads to higher project failure rates. Operationally, this issue comes to light during the resource planning process, which is the topic of today's conversation. So the Project Management Institute, aka PMI, confirms similar challenges in its most recent Pulse of the Profession report. According to their latest study, resource planning issues are a common cause of project failures, as I've highlighted here in red. What I find to be even more interesting from this study is that just 61% of those organizations are consistently utilizing resource management techniques for proper allocation. And that stat leads me to believe a few things. One, most organizations are still relatively immature in their resource management processes. Two, adoption of dedicated resource management solutions remains fairly low. And three, there's much to be gained through greater adoption of best practices, which is our real focus for today. So let's frame up the functional scope of today's discussion. Today's session is all about resource planning. Resource planning is one of the key processes within the resource management lifecycle, as you see here. I'm going to define resource planning as the process of coordinating and allocating named resources to projects. This definition clearly distinguishes resource planning from resource capacity planning, which we discussed in a prior webinar in this series. You'll often hear the phrase, right people, right work at the right time. I think that's a reasonable objective, depending upon how you define the word right in the phrase. Many people view project success as a direct outcome of planning success. I'd also consider incorporating resource satisfaction into the objective. I'd also add the overarching goal of program or portfolio returns to the definition when we look beyond the scope of a single project. So why is resource planning so challenging? Many reasons exist. These three are at the core. The first is scarcity of talent. According to PwC, 72% of CEOs, they're worried about the availability of key skills. That stat aligns with analyst observations of organizations taking on far more projects than they can deliver with their staff. Second reason is computational complexity. Optimizing allocations for a single project is quite achievable with the right data and information. However, complexity grows exponentially as you consider optimization of an overall program or portfolio. And finally, your planning efforts are never truly finished. Even the best plans are subject to multiple rounds of negotiations, revisions, and even reprioritizations that will drive replanning. By the time your plan is finished, it's already out of date. And this vicious cycle alone can justify the need for a more robust planning tool. All right, Lindsay, it's time for our first poll question.
All right, we warned you guys. Which of the following responses best describes the technology used to capture your resource allocation decisions? So what we're trying to find here is what people are using today in your resource allocations. Are you using spreadsheets and other desktop tools, any of the off-the-shelf applications that are out there? And then oftentimes we see some people using some homegrown developed applications, whether it's something makeshift to work or something they've actually custom made. And of course we have another option. Looks like we got some good responses coming in. Thank you everyone for voting for this poll. Give us some information to go on. Looks like we're seeing a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of stuff like that. Kind of aligns with what I've been hearing. Michael, sounds like you've heard a lot of spreadsheets and over the talks you come across as well.
Absolutely. Just curious, do we have any stats yet on the breakdown of responses?
I do.
All right, very interesting. 54% spreadsheets. Yeah, that aligns with what I was guessing and what I'm hearing and seeing in the field and from the analysts. Appreciate the commentary and input here.
Yeah.
All right,
like
good. Well, this lines up with the content for today, so I'm kind of glad to see that, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for improving.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and share the results. Everyone can see spreadsheets came out on top. Most people are just using some spreadsheets or other tools in order to do some of this.
And Lindsay, can we share these results with the audience after the session?
Yeah, we can share them afterward as well. I think they can see them now too, so
okay.
We can go ahead and stop that. And all right. All right, we'll close down that poll. Perfect.
Very good. Well, excellent. In preparing for today's session, I speculated that many of you are early in your journey towards resource planning maturity. And so I compiled this list of 5 planning best practices that everyone can use, regardless of your budget or your current tooling. So let's jump in and review. My first recommendation for the resource managers in the audience is focus. So in the planning world, doing the right things yields far greater results than simply doing things right. If you were only going to implement one of today's best practices, it should be this one, and that is align your time and efforts with the prioritization of your projects. For any prioritized portfolio, it's typical that the top 20% of your projects will drive the majority of returns of your investments. In the absence of automated tools, I'd also suggest time boxing your planning efforts using project priority bands or categories to drive greater impact. Similarly, Pareto type rule is applicable to in-demand roles and skills. That's to say that 80% of your resource conflicts will stem from roughly 20% of your skills in the greatest demand. With today's disruptive technologies, highly skilled resources in domains like big data, machine learning, IoT, they're going to be quite challenging for you to supply. And here, every organization is scrambling for experienced resources that, in many cases, are still being developed. Finally, it's important to be proactive and candid with the PMs regarding known talent gaps. I suggest asking the tough questions directly. What will happen if I can't supply you with that resource for another 4 weeks, as an example? Insights here will help you properly prioritize your most demanding staffing requests. Unfortunately, by focusing first on the highest priority projects and skills, you'll naturally uncover the higher impacts and issues early on. My last point ties in nicely with this next best practice, and I refer to it as seek to understand. In order to be really effective, resource managers need to dig into project details with PMs to uncover the real drivers of success. You need to go beyond the high-level role-based estimates and dive into skill requirements to uncover the most suitable resources. In some instances, the right resource with the right skills and availability may currently be staffed in a different role. Many resources today have a breadth of skills that enable them to fulfill a variety of positions. I'm sure that's true of many of you in the audience today. Furthermore, corporate cross-training initiatives are on the rise as a new group of millennials value career progression opportunities much more so than prior generations. To summarize, I'd say it's only through deeper collaboration and understanding that you'll uncover the options that allow you to expand the pool of potentially matching resources. So flexibility and options on the demand side of resource planning, make your job easier. Equally important as understanding demand is having a comprehensive view of supply. As stated earlier, most organizations would benefit from a more accurate and truer view of capacity. What makes up such a view? Here are 7 key components. The first is line of sight to resource allocations. You really need to understand resource availability and assignments. This includes not only current projects, but also any commitments for future work, both firm and provisional. The second is productive capacity. For each of your resources, what percentage of their working time is available for productive work? Productive capacity at the individual resource level is required. Third component is visibility into non-productive time at a more granular level. Vacation plans and time away for specific training classes are good examples of commitments to track. For shorter term assignments, it's important to capture this variation in productive capacity over time to ensure adequate supply. Fourth component includes location, travel, and remote work availability. So some of your resources may be willing and able to travel internationally, others may not. Some will be able to make daily commute to HQ as needed, others may only be able to work remotely. Knowing such restrictions on supply will help you quickly narrow down the appropriate candidates and resources. Fifth component is skills and competencies. I define competencies to include not only skills, but also knowledge and the abilities to drive success. Proficiency level requirements and certifications are certainly part of this. For a developer, as an example, you might track proficiency levels in specific programming languages, like Java or Python. For project managers, you might track whether a PMP certification is held. Use competencies to improve the likelihood of successful assignments. Sixth element here is cost and charge rates, and those are critical for addressing the more financial and budgetary side of resource planning. Knowledge of equivalent market rates can be very helpful when considering external talent. And lastly is the concept of broader visibility into resource pools. Too often I hear of individuals constraining themselves exclusively to the resources within their own program or BU. In tough labor markets like today, resource managers need to look beyond their own resources and really leverage the broader enterprise to make the most of the collective staff. So what you're seeing here is an extract from RMI's 2019 Skills Tracking and Management Survey. The key takeaway here is that use of soft skills lags far behind hard skills for resourcing decisions. Let's take the staffing of a business analyst position as an example. Hard skill requirements might include the writing of use cases and being well-versed in process modeling tools, as an example. Many experts would suggest that soft skills like meeting management, active listening, communications, negotiation skills are just as important, if not more important, for the role. You can further enhance your planning effectiveness by incorporating employee areas of interest and career development plans into your approach. These are another underutilized set of techniques according to that same RMI survey. All right, Lindsay, it's time for our second poll question.
All right. The second poll question, if everyone can draw your attention here, which of the following data sources do you regularly rely upon to inform resource allocation decisions? So are you taking a look at hard skills and certifications, combining that with some soft skills? What are we taking a look at over here? It's kind of fun to see everyone voting. Appreciate all the participation on the line. Looks like we have some hard skills and certifications. People taking a look at soft skills.
Any areas of interest on the employee side here yet, Lindsay?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
Good portion of it, which is good. It's good to see people are factoring that in. But all right, looks like hard skills and certifications did win out though. And everyone can see the results now. Yep, looks like we saw the most on the hard skills and certifications, but shortly thereafter, we did see some people focusing, incorporating the hard skills and area, or soft skills and area of interest. So,
well, I'm pleased to see the 31%, including the areas of interest there. So folks are thinking along the right lines here. So that's good to see.
Yeah, I agree. All right.
All right. All right, this next technique is all about adding velocity and visibility into your planning efforts. I think most of the resource managers on the line here would be familiar with the idea of soft booking. Soft booking simply represents a provisional or unconfirmed allocation. Soft bookings can provide value in a number of ways. First of all, they enable you to quickly assemble a first pass of your draft resource plan. So getting named resources lined up against your project requirements will give you a much better idea of where you truly stand from a remaining capacity perspective. Soft booking is also very important for future projects where uncertainty might exist in the demand and where use of a hard allocation would be premature. Use of soft allocations is also consistent with PMI best practices and the best practice specifically of progressive elaboration, whereby planning detail is refined over time as projects evolve. Another point to note on soft booking is that it's really just a flag on an allocation. So no advanced or fancy technology is required to capture the designation. So now that we've covered a foundational set of best practices for everyone, I'd like to briefly discuss some of the ways in which automation tools can bring more profound and immediate value to your planning efforts. The first is with the automated delivery and prioritization of resource requests. So when you have integrated planning and delivery tools, they can bring more immediate visibility into your most important decisions. And that will essentially eliminate a lot of the guesswork on your part as a resource manager. The second is automated resource matching. So many tools today provide automated search and matching of resources to unassigned work based upon availability, skills, and even other criteria that you define. The third is visibility into utilization. So the idea here is to avoid both under and over allocation of your resources. Tools with integrated resource scheduling and time capture will give you timely visibility and utilization year to date, as well as forward-looking projections. This results in an allocation process that better balances workloads across your resources. And then finally, what-if scenario analysis and analytics are two very significant capabilities that will drive massive efficiencies when you compare them side by side with any manual approaches you might be taking today. And the last topic I want to cover is really innovation and taking a look at some of the advances taking place that will really shape the future of resource planning and the role of the resource manager. I'd say one of the most promising and relevant innovations going on today is this widespread availability of low-cost artificial intelligence / machine learning platforms. One of the ways to drive better outcomes is to learn from past decisions using AI. So machine learning techniques can specifically digest the past to inform a number of scenarios, including the best types of project assignments for a given resource, the most important skills that determine project success, when to start recruiting for specific in-demand roles and skills, and even when the reallocation of resources across projects is preferable. AI can also help with the incorporation of career development aspirations into assignments. So for example, which projects align best to the employee's desired career path? Which assignments will stretch the employee's development most appropriately? Which training programs should each resource enroll in and when? So today it's largely the line managers versus the project leaders that drive such decisions. And these types of technology advances will help bridge that gap. So to wrap up the content for today's discussion, I'd like to leave you with 5 key takeaways that you can start putting into practice right away. The first is prioritization, and that is focus your efforts on the assignments and resources that matter most to the business. The second is collaboration. And that's collaboration with your PMs to understand their projects, and also with your business partners to work through issues. The third is taking a more holistic approach to supply, right? Don't limit or constrain your thinking to the current assets of your organization. The fourth is iteration. So use soft bookings to jumpstart your iteration cycles. And lastly, automate. Making good decisions requires up-to-date, accurate information and insights. There's easy to use and readily deployable cloud-based resource management solutions that are available today. And numerous leading edge innovations are right around the corner.
All right. Thank you for that, Michael. That was an excellent presentation. I thought there was a lot of good information in there. And I think we covered a lot of information in a short amount of time. So we might benefit from going through these again in the slides. So everyone, just as a quick reminder, we will be sending those out afterward, the recording and the slides. But I thought there was a lot of good stuff in there. So thank you again. Absolutely. Just a quick note for people that don't know who Keyed In is. We were founded in 2011 by George and Lori Klaus. Former Epicor CEO and SVP. Keyed In was acquired from Atlantic Global, is now the Keyed In that you know today. It was acquired in 2012 over in the UK. We focus on both PPM and PSA products, specializing in project portfolio and resource management. Keyed In also, go ahead and flip the slide there, Michael. I don't want to take too much time on this, but just to provide a quick overview, talk about the system to support the efforts of the organization. We heard about how resourcing can impact the way projects are staffed and how some of the things that worked in the past might not be sustainable for much longer. Keyed In provides solutions that help project managers and resource managers address some of these fundamental challenges of resource management. Look at capacity and demand planning, soft skills tracking and inventory, utilization, and all-around leveraging solutions to let projects work for you instead of the other way around. We do take a unique method for addressing projects, both from the top down to ensure strategic alignment and prioritization of incoming requests. We combine that with a bottom-up version of projects to get a full picture of task planning and execution, ensure you have the right resources assigned to projects and adequate skills to address the requirements. Michael talked about how accounting for hard skills and certifications isn't enough anymore. We need to get ahead of resource planning. This is why retention matters, and how taking account for soft skills and some of those area of interest that he talked about will not only help in getting the right people assigned to the right work, but it'll help in the longevity of projects and resources for both the customers and the organization. Go ahead to the next one. Again, I don't want to get too far into this. Our sales team can do a much better job explaining this if you are interested, but we do support a lot of the areas of resource management. It's an ever-evolving cycle. provides for the needs of the organization through capacity and demand planning, some of the centralized resource inventory, skills data, forecasting, what if scenario modeling. We also have within this what if scenario modeling, you can tell what's going to be happening. You can put in different models and see if it'll work out for you in the execution phase of things. So if you need to make changes, hopefully you can identify those red flags early and resolve them, any of those conflicts. So helps to get things going and making sure that your resources are where they should be at any given time. Looks like we will have plenty of time for this Q&A. So if anybody wants to put the questions in, and again, if you would like to hear more about Keyed In, we are happy to go further into some of this. Just a quick, we'll put it up as a poll. If you are interested in talking to one of our sales representatives, we will go ahead and get you connected. If not, just let us know, and no worries. Give everyone a second to let us know if they're interested in hearing more. And while we're doing that too, if people want to be putting some Q&A questions in there, while we've got Michael on the line, it'd be great to get some live Q&A going. Excited
Absolutely.
for the discussion. I think we have a hand raised here. If somebody has an issue or a question, go ahead and put that into the Q&A and we'll address it there. All right. Thank you everyone for taking your time to do that one. Michael, if you want to just go up to the next one, we'll put the contact up so that people know where to find us in case they would like to, and we can move into the Q&A.
Very good. I see we have some Q&A questions come in. I'll start tackling those.
Sounds good. We did get a question about PDUs, and apologies, I didn't mention that. We are not, Keyed In is not a registered education provider through PM.com, so our content doesn't automatically qualify, but it does typically qualify. So if you've submitted under the self-directed learning, it'll typically get approved for qualification just based on the content. So, so go ahead and submit that for PDU credit under the self-directed. We don't give a PDU number for that. We did get another question. What size organization is the tipping point, they're calling it, where it makes sense for resource management automation? So at what point, Michael, do you think people start needing something? We talked about having spreadsheets and how that's kind of typically how people are managing it, but from there, what do you think makes it where that's no longer good enough?
Yeah, really, I think there's two dimensions, resources and projects. So, typically when the resources get beyond some number of tens, could be 30, could be 50, trying to track that in Excel gets pretty unwieldy. And then, on the project side, really look at what is your ability to do the analysis, the impact analysis, figuring out how can I optimize the return on my investment. Doing that manually runs short very quickly. And so, if you've got, could be 50, could be, some number of tens of projects, you're going to very quickly fall short with manual methods. The other part that's really important is it's not always volume, but it's really having a centralized repository. So even with just 30 or 50 resources and 30 or 50 projects, if the resource manager has to go to 5 different systems, HR system, a time capture system, separate reporting, you can see all of the inefficiencies, and getting that lack of having integration with the delivery side is also going to be a big hurdle for them. So if the resource managers are only getting project status updates on a monthly basis, that's going to really impact their ability to do more fine-grained course correction throughout the life cycle of a project. So it's not always volumes. It's also, you have to take into account the rest of the infrastructure and just how disparate the set of tools that an individual is using and how effective or ineffective they might be.
Thank you. Yep, I agree with that. It kind of, you're able to get so far and then it breaks pretty quick. There's another question here. Can you please explain the technology architecture associated with your PPM and RPM solution?
Yeah, most I'd say our solution and most other modern PPM solutions leverage a modern cloud-based, SaaS-based architecture. So deploys in the cloud, available with just a modern internet browser and internet connection. So the great news there is that you can get up and running very quickly, right? So from a technical deployment perspective, we can particularly stand up an environment, technically in literally minutes. Now, of course, when you think about implementation, there's a lot more involved, but on the tech side, it's actually very, very straightforward and quick time to value. So it really then comes down to getting do you have a handle on your business requirements? If you're ready to go with your processes and what you want to deploy from a future state perspective, those vendors can get going pretty quickly. And then the other side of the implementation are the integration points. So what are the systems in scope for integration? Are we bringing over some legacy applications? Are we tying in with a back-end ERP? Is there integration with CRM? Fortunately, most modern vendors like ourselves do leverage modern integration platforms and have pre-built connectors and a lot of flexibility and options for tying in with your existing systems. So that also is a leg up for the more modern-based tools available today.
Excellent. We're getting at some more product questions. What types of project management software do you integrate with? MS Project is the example they gave.
Yeah, so we have out-of-the-box integration with Microsoft Project, which is probably the one we get asked for the most. We also have our own native work breakdown structure and project plan management capabilities within the solution. And then we're also able to import and export flat files, whether it be CSV or XLS, that can also be exchanged with other project type tools, let's say like a Primavera or others.
Excellent. What tools are available to identify the skills required? Question.
Yes, yeah. So skills required are typically, there's two places that you'll see skills. One would be they should be linked with the roles and the role-based forecast or demand. And then the second area where the skills are linked in is at the resource level. And then the software can help with the automated matching of the two, so that a resource manager can quickly get a list of for skills-based demand. Here are the available resources that have availability and also have the skills that match up with those minimum requirements.
Excellent.
I see a few. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I see. A few other questions I'm seeing on my side here. One here is we have a skills database, but it's not always up to date. Should we still use it? And I'd say yes, but with caution, right? So you want to spend a little more time with each resource to better understand, their competencies and proficiency levels. Notwithstanding, I'd say it would behoove your organization to address, the issue more systemically. Right? If you go back to that 2019 RMI study, their overall, or one of their overall recommendations and suggestions that an effective skills database requires both regular updates and also periodic validation by a manager or a subject matter expert. I see a lot of companies still relying upon annual updates, and I'd suggest that, quarterly or if not monthly updates should be the goal. Right. Here's another question I'm seeing here. What, we use a proficiency level set of high, medium, and low. Does that need to be refined or more granular? I'd say yes, more levels would be better. So, a high, medium, low scale would not allow for differentiation of, let's say, above average versus most proficient, as one example. I mostly see proficiency scales that range from a 1 to 5, a 1 to 7, or a 1 to 10. And, given that you're on an equivalent of a 1 to 3 scale, I'd suggest that transitioning to a 1 to 5 scale would be a logical next step to consider.
All right. There was another question about skills questionnaire templates provided. Um, I think that's in regards to the skills database building.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of modern solutions today have configurable forms and fields capabilities tied in with their resource management skills database. So creating custom input forms that are specific to your roles and skills and hierarchy is something that a lot of solutions can do today.
Perfect. Oh, here's another one. I like this one. We get this one quite a bit. What's the minimum resource allocation you typically allow for resource managers to utilize? I know there's quite a bit of dilemmas where the perfect amount of utilization lies. So did you have any thoughts on that one particularly, Michael?
Could you repeat the question again? I'm sorry, I missed the crux of it.
Yeah, sorry, I started talking around it.
It's okay.
What's the minimum resource allocation you typically allow for resource managers to utilize? I know you can probably set it to different utilizations, but typically you don't want them 100% utilized, for example, because that's not realistic. But they were just asking about what is the minimum resource allocation you typically allow them to utilize?
Yeah, and I think technically, I don't know that there is any, restriction, right? So I think we would, as part of the implementation, work with the client to, if there's any hard and fast restrictions that they'd want to put into their system, we would, accommodate that with, appropriate configuration. So in general, most of the solutions, when you consider comparing and contrasting to wide open use of spreadsheets and others, most systems try to leave their systems by default pretty wide open so that they don't actually impede someone from doing something they want to do. And then typically over time, as the clients learn about where more tighter controls would be beneficial, we'll deploy those additional business rules and controls, oftentimes sometimes as a phase two after the client learns what's working and what else needs to be fine-tuned.
Awesome. There's another question here. What's the typical amount of time to implement your solution, including training?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I hate to give the consulting "it depends" answer. But it really, as you can imagine, if we're implementing it on the smaller end and they want to go with the off-the-shelf solution, we have packages that will deploy. We call it a quick start package, where someone can get up and running in literally weeks. And then on the flip side, if you think about a Fortune 500 company and it's multinational and multiple countries and different business units, you could be looking at a year or two long implementation. So it really depends. I think for us, our typical implementation is probably somewhere between the 2 to 4 month range for a larger SMB or mid-market type client. But again, in general, when you look at most of the time, with a long pole in the tent on the implementation, it really is on the client side and having agreement on their requirements and success criteria for the deployments. Because again, on the technology side, setting up the environment and having our professional service consultants configure the application, the actual effort there is relatively very small compared to the overall implementation time frame. I hope that was helpful.
Yes. Here's another question. Any thoughts on managing resources who are only involved in project work part-time, i.e. employees who have a day job but are pulled in for process improvement initiatives or Six Sigma projects?
Yeah, I would say in general, we want to include those into the projects and the tracking, right? Because in order to improve, you really need to have a more complete picture of your projects, your costs, the effort, the time, so that you can improve over time, and particularly for if you have projects that are more repeatable. Even then, even for one-off projects, that might be a one-off improvement initiative. It's still what would want to capture the effort, tie that into tracking the productive utilization of the resources. Again, capture the full costs of the project, And so, yeah, I see no reason why not to include part-time resources into the overall tracking reporting on your projects.
Awesome. There's another question here. We showed some desktop reporting views. Are those native in the product, or do you need a report writer tool like Crystal or MSBI?
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, so if I recall back to the slide, I believe all of those reports were native. So in Keyed, we have our own custom report writing tool. It's all done through UI. But at the same time, a lot of our clients do have an enterprise standard for reporting like Power BI or Tableau or other. And so we also have the option where clients can use our reporting API and can pull out the data from the reports and then point their favorite reporting tool at that. So our clients have the flexibility to use either the native or their own favorite tools. But again, going back to the original question, I believe what you saw in the slides were with the native keyed-in reporting solution.
Awesome. We're getting some great questions in here too. Thanks everyone for your participation. There's one here. It sounds like a follow-up from a previous one. Our organization is matrix based and resources are full shared across our departments. Prioritization is really a challenge. Does your solution integrate with MS Project? I know you answered that a little bit, but if you want to touch on that just a little bit, Michael.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we do have our solution is integrated with Microsoft Project. Again, I think to some degree that answer is a little bit orthogonal to, I think, the other part of the question. But we also, I know we do have a number of clients that have a similar, matrix type structure. And again, I think having one solution that spans all of resource, project, and cost data is even more important for more timely and accurate reporting and visibility across all of the different organizations and the resource sharing across structures.
Awesome. There's another question here. How is a PPM tool going to help me most with my planning efforts?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I'd say my short answer would be 3 buckets: visibility, effectiveness, and efficiency. So, assuming you have a successful implementation, you'll have all of your project and resource data consolidated, and more importantly, consolidated, harmonized, again, into a single centralized system, right? So you heard me earlier in this presentation talk about knowing supply and demand. Well, a PPM tool that addresses both planning and delivery is going to bring that together, both sides, supply and demand, right? And furthermore, PPM solutions that not only do they bring all the data together, but they also give you some interactive tools. So for the resource manager, we'll get an interactive planning console whereby they can manage their resource allocations or requests. So no longer would he or she need to log into multiple apps or maintain project information or people information and those extracts in a tool like Excel.
Excellent. Looks like we have a couple more product specific questions that we'll probably answer offline, just for those that have more specific and more scenario based.
And the other thing I want to just offer up, Lindsay, is that feel free to, if folks want to go deeper into these product questions, we'll probably need to have a little more interactive conversation that will take a little more time. So feel free to pass along my contact information. I'd be happy to follow up via phone or email and have any more detailed conversations.
Excellent. Yeah, appreciate that. It looks like there was some more detailed questions here. So we will, everybody on the line that has been answering those, they actually came in as anonymous. So we will have to track you down and get you some answers. All right. Well, if there's no other questions today, again, we thank everybody for your time today. Thank you for joining. We did wrap up a little bit early, so you get 15 minutes back in your day, and appreciate you again for joining. Thank you again, Michael, for all this wonderful presentation.
Absolutely. And again, thank the audience for all their participation.
Yes, thank you so much.